Magnum TA here, and you're listening to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome one more time to the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling podcast. And as usual, I am here with my main homie, my tag team partner through this thing called life, the wild one, old Hoot Sheik, Jared Street. What's up, brother?
Not much, brother. How about you? It's quite an introduction. That's a new one. Yeah, I'm the
Hoot to my punky.
I'm the Hoot to your punky, the animal to your hawk.
The Davy to my dynamite. Yeah.
Am I the Marty to your Shawn? I don't know.
Oh, I think I'm Marty in that one, brother. Let's just be honest.
I'm the Anvil to your Bret. How about that?
There you go. There you go. Yeah, that's about right. Well, cool, man. Well, today we are talking wrestling feuds. And as usual, we're doing it with the Sheik's patented Mount Rushmore system. So, we were like kind of thinking of ideas and stuff. And, you were like, how about we do wrestling feuds, Mount Rushmore of Wrestling Feuds? Because, we could get really down deep into this, but I liked that you kind of said, let's limit it to a Mount Rushmore. And it makes sense. So, we came up with our Mount Rushmores, and we're going to kind of present our thoughts on them. I've actually got some good and detailed notes here. And, I don't really want to say this is like a 1, 2, 3, 4 system, but I kind of did it this way just to, kind of, I don't know, make things easier. But I guess, the idea of a feud is basically the basis of great pro wrestling, is it not?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you were just going out there and just having matches, yeah, that could be great and everything like that. But if you had no skin in the game or something like that, then it doesn't mean as much. I mean, going back as far, as, like Lou Thez and some of them, they had rivals. I mean, it's what would you do if nobody ever had a rival that they had to worry about losing their status to and everything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's natural, right? It's just it's a natural thing. I love it. So, we are talking feuds today to kind of go back a little bit as we do our little retracing of our show here. We did have a couple great episodes here recently. One of them is I brought our friend of the show, old buddy of mine, the Dragon Scott Lee. They did a tribute show to my buddy Ken Steele. It was called the Mardi Gras Brawl. Go back and listen to that episode. Even though you maybe didn't make it to the show, you can still listen to our conversation, which was awesome. Then we also had in the same week, so that was a special bonus episode that I did the interview on. But then the episode after that dropped on the normal Thursday, was of course the Ace of Belts, Dave Milliken. And man, that was a great interview. Had a lot of fun with that one.
Yeah, man, great stuff. You can tell he's just a genuine man. And, like I said, people don't have to be good to us or don't owe us anything, and from what we've experienced, people are just willing to talk and willing to give their time. I mean,
and he is so knowledgeable, so interesting, just a good conversation, even though he knows and he knows and has contact with some of the biggest names in the business, but he's just a regular good guy. That's just what you got to say about him. I didn't feel any kind of airs about him. He was confident in his abilities, obviously. So to know that guy is a friend of the show, that's awesome, man. I'm just stoked to say that,
Yeah. And, the one thing that got me more than anything, like to show you what type of person he is when you mentioned your buddy Ken, like he didn't, you knew right away the way he talked. He knew Ken, right. He knew he'd passed, and, he was saddened by that fact. And, he could have, we could have just been brushed over that segment, but he spent a few minutes talking with you about Ken, and that shows you what type of person he is.
It grounded him in my mind, and not in a bad way, but in a good way. Just, super genuine dude, super talented, super important, super genuine dude. And that's pretty much that's pretty much the goal of this show, I think, is to present those people just like Jeff Daniels, just like our buddy Cassidy Riley, who just retired from the ring and, looking like $1 million. So I know big things are in his future, maybe in Hollywood. We'll see.
Possibly.
But anyway, long story short, we just try to present the real side of these amazing people in this business that we've loved all of our life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of our show. And if that's the theme of the show, then I'm happy with that, So simply put, we're two brothers that love pro wrestling and love to talk about it. And we basically record our conversations. But in the long run, if we can represent pro wrestling at its realest and at its truest form of, hey, these people are real, they've got real stories, and these stories need to be heard if you've never heard them before. So I think that when I explained this show, just actually at Dairy Queen the other day, I was picking up something and I was talking to the guy and he was like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I'm a podcaster." And he's like, "Oh, really? What do you podcast?" I'm like, "Well, I have a couple wrestling shows and, we do some fun stuff." And he's like, "Oh, pro wrestling? Okay, cool, man." And I mean, I described it as, a real glimpse behind the curtain of these people and a real glimpse into pro wrestling. And I think that's what I love about this show. So
yeah, absolutely, man.
So we got a big show today. I don't want to take up too much time. Obviously, this is the intro of the show. So Sheik, you got anything you'd like to share with the people today?
Just buckle up and get ready to hear our list of these feuds, man. These feuds probably shaped us in our love of wrestling. So
no,
it'll be worthwhile to hear.
I think that's perfect. I agree. It's like the Hatfields and them old McCoys, But anyway, I always hated that Southwest Virginia wasn't represented in that. You had West Virginia and Kentucky.
Right.
You didn't have a family down in Southwest Virginia ready to fight? Anyway, yeah. I'm sure, I'm sure there was.
Yeah.
We're all just hillbillies anyway, so we're good. But the long story on that one is feuds are a basic and absolute necessity of a great pro wrestling storyline, and I can't wait to dig into these. So why don't we take us a quick break here, and we'll be right back with the Mount Rushmore of Wrestling Feuds.
Hey guys, this is Wolfie D from PG-13. Check out my podcast, Live and in Color with Wolfie D, every Monday at noon. We're talking Memphis, we're talking ECW, WCW, WWF, everywhere that I've been. We even have some great guests, some Hall of Famers on the show with us. Every Monday, Live and in Color with Wolfie D.
If you're a fan of rock and music, I'd really appreciate it if you took a moment to check out my podcast. It's called the Decibel Geek Podcast. We've been doing it for about 10 years now. We talk about Kiss. We talk about Ozzy. We talk about Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses and Metallica. We talk about all the legends from the 60s and on, up to brand new bands that you should be hearing about today that you're not going to hear on the radio. It's Decibel Geek. Wherever you find your podcasts, you'll find us there. If you love rock and roll, I can almost guarantee you're going to love my show.
All right, we're back with the official Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling Mount Rushmore of Wrestling Feuds. Man, that's a mouthful right there.
Yeah, man. Got me tongue twisted for you there.
Yeah, it was a trick. So anyway, to kind of go over some quick feuds, and I don't want to name too many here because I don't want to get into it, but there are certain ones that, like the Von Erichs and the Freebirds, Brody and Abdullah, Austin and The Rock, Sting and the NWO, Rock and Roll in the Midnights, Hogan and Andre, Hogan and Macho, Hogan and Piper, Ric Flair and Great Muta, Sting, Great Muta, Vince, Stone Cold, Bret Hart, HBK, Dusty, the Horseman, Hogan. I mean, it's so many to name, but we had to pick our top four. So this was hard.
Yeah, I didn't give us the fifth option like I do the guests we have on.
Yeah, we don't get. Yeah, we don't get the liberties that we give to our guests, so it's okay. But this was hard, man. This was not easy.
Oh, very hard. And we talked about it a little bit, our list. And a lot of times we don't share a list completely with each other before, but we kind of wanted to, see where each other were at. And I made a couple of changes at the last minute because I thought, man, we need to include at least one more of these that we didn't get in our initial lists. Kind of, I took one that you had that's very dear to me, and I took it out just so I could include this one that I think it would be terrible if we miss. So we'll talk about that more when we get to the point.
Yeah, I like that. And I agree with you. The one that you put in place of the one, I think is a must-have on any list. I didn't put it on mine, but again, the way that I looked at it, I was like, okay, these four, I always just try to remove all of them until I can't remove any. And that's generally when I come up with my four. Again, it's a Mount Rushmore. It's not really necessarily in an order. I will just say this, that I'm trying to represent the majority, because honestly, all four of these could be my number one, and I would be cool with that if we were numbering them. So the way that I look at it is, if you want to do like George Washington to Abraham Lincoln, I don't really care about that. We'll just name them here. I tell you what, I'm kind of running my mouth a lot, so why don't I let you go first on this one, Sheik, and start with your first Mount Rushmore of Wrestling Feud.
So first in the order I'm going to talk about it's this one would not be first if I was listing them in order. I'll just say that. But this, like, when I watch videos of this, or when I hear it, or when I see it, just see a picture, it brings back such good memories of my childhood, of watching wrestling. But it's Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby the Brain Heenan, as the announce team.
Man, that's outside the box. I like that one.
So it's very outside the box, and people who know me know I like that. I like outside the box. But just to hear them, the banter they had, and the charisma and chemistry they had together, like, to know that Gorilla was a heel in wrestling when he was active in the ring. It is so, you don't really realize that he was a heel then, and then he's the straight man in the feud with him and Heenan. It's like they're just bounce off each other, and he just is always criticizing Bobby for being a heel.
Will you stop?
And everything like that. It's just amazing at the way they can, the way that the chemistry they have is just off the charts.
Oh, no joke. And, we talked about it when we had Gene Jackson on the show, when we talked about, listening to Vince McMahon and Jesse Ventura. That was my favorite combo with Jesse in it. But Brain and Gorilla, from that primetime TV show that they did, from calling matches, you're right. I mean, the funny thing, and I think everybody knows this, is no secret, but they were like best friends. You know what I mean?
Best
and
friends.
They rode together when the day Gorilla died on Nitro. Bobby Heenan cried.
Before we start with tonight's action, Brain, there's something we both, but particularly you, have to say about our longtime friend, Gorilla Monsoon.
Gorilla will be sadly missed. He was one big tough man. He was a decent, honest man. And we're all going to miss him very much. And the pearly gates in heaven?
Yeah.
It's now going to be called the Gorilla position. Goodbye, my friend.
Very well said, Bobby the Brain Heenan. He is going to be sorely missed.
And, there's so many cool things about their story. But if you were just to listen to them as a full believing wrestling fan, you would think they hated each other. You would think that they could not stand the sight of each other, that they were literally forced to work together. It's just such great chemistry between those two guys.
Yeah, and it was just, you're talking about that. When I kind of fell down a rabbit hole looking up their videos, sounds familiar or something, doesn't it? I don't know.
Wait, what is it? About that? She fell down a rabbit hole?
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind.
but they were like, I mean, like, times they were like nowhere near a wrestling ring, and they were like, I don't know, Gorilla was supposedly on vacation, and Heenan's like coming to visit him on vacation, and he's like, why are you here?
I love the one where they were in that old West town on that.
Yeah, those are awesome stuff. I mean, like, you could pretty much put them in any environment and they could make it entertaining.
Totally. It was mini movies for us. You know what I mean? And what's your favorite match that they called, do you think?
Man, it's tough.
Royal Rumble 92, would that be one?
I mean, 92 Royal Rumble is awful. That's so cliche for me because that's one of my favorite things in wrestling history, but it's probably that because Brain is so nervous about Flair being third in there.
Yeah.
Gorilla just like you're done now, buddy.
So, yeah, I know. It's not fair to Flair, you know? Yeah.
So probably that. Yeah, that's true.
I love it.
There's so many more though. It's probably unfair to just have that one, but they're just I kept trying to not include them because they were announcers at this point. But they were both so instrumental in wrestling history. I mean, Gorilla Monsoon had a thing with Muhammad Ali back in the day.
I know. Yeah.
And Bobby Heenan was so underrated as a worker. Just, maybe not the purest wrestler, but he could make you entertain when he got in that ring. I mean,
I think he's one of the greatest workers of all time because he did just that. He worked. I mean, you ask Ric Flair. I remember listening to Ric Flair about his talking about a Mount Rushmore. He included Vince McMahon, for what he did for pro wrestling, and he also included Bobby Heenan, which is crazy because Bobby Heenan is just a manager to a lot of people, but in the long run, as a worker, when I did managing, guys would tell me, "No, man, you're a worker. You got to think of yourself as that, and you're working the people." So anyway, love that. Great deal. Excellent feud. Nothing can really top that as far as announced teams go, So I'm going to go out with a big one right now. And I've got quite a bit of notes here with them. Of course, I'm the idiot that overnotes. I overnote. Is that a new term?
Overnote.
Anyway, well, this my very first one that I'm going to put on the Mount Rushmore of Wrestling Feuds is one of the greatest of all time, and no question is Ric Flair versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. It's a famous trilogy that actually ended in a tie. They tied themselves essentially in 1989. Steamboat won at the Chi-Town Rumble, and then a controversial finish happened at the Clash, and then Flair won back the title at Wrestle War. So, it started in 1977, actually, with the TV title. A lot of people don't know it goes back that far, but back in Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, Georgia Championship, all these, great companies that they worked in. But Ricky and Rick actually started their feud in 77 with an NWA Mid-Atlantic TV title.
Weren't they actually trained together by Vern or around the same time, kind of?
Yeah, they were in the same class.
Crazy, man. Crazy.
In that class together. It is crazy. So it's almost like it was destiny.
Yeah.
What's funny is I've read that Steamboat actually preferred Flair over Randy Savage. So a lot of people consider that WrestleMania 3 to be the greatest match of all time, but Steamboat actually preferred Flair because, Flair called it in the ring, and, Steamboat loved that. He preferred that as well,
Yeah.
Flair, the first world title match was in 84 at the NWA Night of Champions. So that was the first time that Ricky wrestled the Nature Boy for the heavyweight title. And Steamboat's honestly, we can say Sting, and this may be controversial to say, but Flair's last major rival before Hulk took over the WCW, basically. So once Hulk came in, Flair's rival was Hulk. You know what I mean? But up until that point, that was pretty much his last major rival. I guess Sting is kind of his eternal rival, but, it's kind of a controversial statement that I just said there. So Steamboat actually retired in 94. He was going to come back in 2000 in Ring of Honor to work against CM Punk, but Flair actually ended up talking him out of that, saying he didn't, think he should ruin his legacy by coming back. Flair told somebody not to come back. I mean,
yeah.
Anyway, his actual final match was on a WCW Saturday night in 1994, and Flair actually booked the match. because he was on the booking team. And actually the most recent deal with Rick that he just did, the Ric Flair's last match, it was supposed to be a 6-man tag team match. The first I heard was it was going to be FTR and Steamboat, Flair and Jay Lethal and somebody else. That was early on, and then it turned into Steamboat actually ended up declining that match. I honestly think that he didn't think Flair could still go. You know what I mean? I almost feel that. And so then Steamboat ended up having his own final match at Big Time Wrestling in North Carolina. It's kind of crazy how things ended for those guys. It would have been cool to see them one last time, but if neither one of them can do what they used to do, I would rather just leave the memories alone, right? You know, leave them there.
Leave the memories alone.
So...
yeah, why would you want to see Flair and Steamboat go out there at their respective ages? What is it, like Steamboat's like 68, 69, and
Flair's
73, 72?
Yeah, 70, something like that, yeah.
Why would you want to diminish everything they had with that trilogy with a match that gets them paid, but it really doesn't mean anything? And
doesn't, yeah.
All respects to both of them, I didn't see the Steamboat last match, but, you know, Flair's, it had some good spots in it, but he wasn't Ric Flair. I mean,
right.
For whatever reason. And how can you expect him to be? I didn't expect him to be everything he's ever been in the ring either. So
absolutely agree, and you hit it on the head there. So anyway, you know, that's my first one.
Which of the trilogy is your favorite match?
Man, I think the one in Nashville. I think the one where Flair wins it back. I think that's my favorite.
I think I've always preferred the Chi-Town Rumble match, but
it's a great match. I don't know. It just seems like that one always pops in my head when I think of that trilogy is the Chi-Town Rumble match. But I loved the finish at the Clash, the controversial finish. You know, Flair's feet are on the ropes, vacate the title, la-di-da. I love it. But yeah, it's crazy that they basically their trilogy ended in a tie, which you think in a trilogy somebody's going to go up 2-1, you know, but
right.
Yeah. Anyway, never going to be another feud like that. I know there's several people that probably have tried to make a feud similar to that, but never going to be.
Dave Meltzer, I hope you're not listening to this with he just said that.
Yes. 8. I give it 10 stars out of 5. Anyway.
I mean, I think if Meltzer rates some of these matches these days so high, he needs to go back and redo his system. I mean, like.
Yeah. Fix his system, because there's, you know, he just gave this recent Kenny Omega Vikingo match 5 stars, and, you know, man, I didn't like that Kenny was placing himself a lot of places. I really didn't enjoy. I hate that transparency of making it. You know, it just takes me out of the match, and it was extremely talented guys going at it. I don't want to get off on that, but I just hate the telegraph moves, man. Can't get with them. Never will be. These guys back in the day made it look so much more easy than they do now. But that's why we're here. Give me back my pro wrestling, right?
Exactly.
All right, brother. What's your second one?
My second one, you know, when you think about feuds, especially early on building the WWF into the WWE, into the product it is and would forever be, Hulk Hogan needed a foil, and what better foil than Roddy Piper?
Mm-hmm. That's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, you can think about things like this, and there will be some people who say their feud wasn't fully flushed out. You know, it wasn't fully given everything it should. And that's true, but it was still there, and it's still very meaningful, and you got it in the cartoon, and you got it in WCW, and you got it all over the place. And it was great to see, you know, Hulk Hogan have somebody like that. Now, Piper probably did mess up some stuff and could have had a better feud if he had, you know, trusted everything for him not to be buried or whatever like that. I think he was a little bit worried, and he didn't want to be pinned by Mr. T, which I can understand that.
For sure. Yeah. He was kind of paranoid, and that's natural,
Right.
Especially with your spot. If you think he's fought so hard to get to the number one heel in the WWF, fought and worked so hard for that, to be paranoid a little bit, it's natural, man. Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Especially when they just brought in this golden god, that is going to be your rival. And in all points, is your superior in a sense to the people. I thought Hulk Hogan was invincible. You know what I mean? So anyway,
did you know that I didn't know this till doing a little research on it? Piper won their first ever match. It was a count out. It was like at a house show in Boston or something like that.
Okay.
I didn't know that. They wrestled more on WCW than in WWE.
Yeah. So their feud was more a thought, basically, than actually in the ring in WWF. So. Yeah.
Yeah. And they wrestled at the first non-WrestleMania pay-per-view.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Wrestling Classic event, I think is what it was called or something.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of crazy, little snippets about the stuff. When he came out at Halloween Havoc 96 at the very end of the program, I remember popping big time.
Yeah, because Bischoff had sold it like nobody's gonna be here, this kind of thing. And this was right at the time that Bischoff was about to go heel too, you know what I mean? So it was kind of all coinciding. And Piper comes out and basically calls out Bischoff. And Bischoff, I'm sorry if I'm cutting you off on this, but
go ahead.
I love this era of WCW. Bischoff's like, hey, yeah, I tried to sign you, and he's like, was it a curvy road or was it a straight road? It's some great stuff that Piper did there, man. He basically flushed Bischoff out, He
exposed him, right?
It was great.
Exposed the secret. It's the big thing that got confusing for people, if you remember right, at Halloween Havoc, he comes out, then they wrestle at Starrcade 96, and Piper beats him, but it wasn't for the title, and everybody was like,
what?
It's like the biggest. So it's like if we had Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes coming up at WrestleMania here, and but it's not for the title. It's like, what?
It was lame.
It's like, what the crap? It's like,
I remember that. It was lame,
Which probably explains why they put Piper over, since it wasn't for the title.
Of course.
But it just, and one great thing I've loved about this feud, why I had to include it. So in WWF, WWE, whatever you want to call it, in their time there in the 80s, the heel was Piper, the face Hogan.
Yeah.
Well, they did in WCW. Piper was always face, and Hogan was, I think, always heel when they wrestled. I'm
pretty sure.
I can't. Maybe there was one time they were both face near the end or something like that. But
maybe.
But it just shows you what a great feud it was to take it. In the 80s they worked face heel, and then in the 90s they flipped it and did the other way. So for both wrestlers to do that shows talent and shows chemistry on their part. And, I always, no matter what, I always think of Piper as probably Hogan's greatest opponent, just for a fit wise. People are going to say Andre, but man, Andre.
I would put Macho over Andre, I think.
Yeah, I would too. There's a huge moment at WrestleMania 3 with Andre, but they just didn't have enough of it for me to be above that. But Macho's a very good one. There did feel some realness between Macho and Hogan, and I think there was. But
yeah. Speaking of, go to the Live Wolfie D YouTube channel if you want to see some realness about the Macho Man. That's coming out on the George Weingroff episode, by the way. So anyway, y'all check that one out. Yeah,
maybe too real for me.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No. It's okay. It's but they had their moment, and Andre and Hogan had their big moment where he ripped the chain off of Hogan. It was on Piper's Pit. So,
if Andre and Hogan had been at WrestleMania 1, man, that might have been a match. You know what I mean? But it was almost like Andre progressed really just degraded. His health degraded so badly by WrestleMania 3. He was really starting to show that he was very immobile. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
it's sad. I mean, it's sad to think that what could have been and what might have been, but what happened was amazing. You know, like I've heard all the time, 700 pounds, I shredded my entire back, my whole spine had to be replaced. You know, I'm still holding him up in the air, the stinky giant, you know. So.
Yeah.
And then Piper always said he had villagers in his teeth and stuff. Piper, that's another thing about Piper is Piper could smoke you on the microphone. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
You wouldn't even know what happening to you, you know. So
you'd be 12 sentences behind and he's already smoked you twice and you're like,
yeah. Huh?
Like, what? the biggest miss of this feud though to me, and why if I was ranking it wouldn't be top for me, would be the fact that I wish we had a WWF right after WrestleMania 1 somewhere. I wish Piper takes the title somehow, and then you get WrestleMania, another big event or something like that, and Hogan takes it back. That's what was missing from this is that Piper never had that WWF title.
Yeah, maybe like he could have won it at Survivor Series or even SummerSlam, held on to it. And I know the events didn't exist yet, but what I mean, he could have won it around that time of those events that are going to come. And then what happens then is at the WrestleMania 2, instead of King Kong Bundy, it's him and Piper in a cage where Hogan comes out victorious. You know, you don't want Piper to win the title at Mania 1, but you also don't want him to, you know, you want him to have a good run with it. So it seems simple now, but there's got to be a million reasons why it didn't happen, other than, you know, the fact that probably Vince just thought he had everything in Hogan and that was the deal, you know.
And didn't you all say on the Thunder in Paradise episode that Didn't you or Gene once said that Piper said, I don't know if I would drop it back?
Yeah. Well, that was actually Dave Milliken that said that.
Oh, yeah, it was Milliken. Yeah, sorry. Confusing my episodes. Go back and listen to both of those episodes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But anyway. So next up for me, I've got this is a tough one here too, because this one actually could be the ultimate one, but it is WCW versus WWF or WWE, whatever you want to call it. But basically, you know, it dates back to NWA Jim Crockett. Vince always tried to beat them, whether it was with pay-per-views, cable companies, whatever. He tried to double book. I mean, there was one where you couldn't get WrestleMania if you bought Starrcade, Survivor Series, or Starrcade. So he gave it some things away just to cause problems with them, and he told cable companies, if you carry that one, you can't have WrestleMania or you can't have mine. I mean, it was dastardly from the start. And then, you know, Flair takes the big gold to Stamford, and then that, you know, kind of continues it. That's to me, this is the early stages of what became the WWF WCW feud. And then, you know, Polka Dot Dusty. Think about that. That's Vince sticking a rib to one of his greatest rivals, one of the greatest wrestling minds of all time, ran out in polka dots and got it over like a dream would, you know. Yeah. One of the big things, the big shot, is obviously Eric Bischoff gets approved for a Monday night show. And basically he said, Ted Turner's like, I want to go head to head with them. And of course, WWF had never had anybody go head to head with them. Of course, they had their Monday Night Raw, which Monday Night Raw was a legendary idea anyway, because it took them out of syndication and put them into a live taped format where it was something regular that you could count on being there versus, you know, like Saturdays or Sundays or whatever, you would see superstars and that kind of stuff. But again, it took them out of syndication and put them into a primetime deal. And then Ted Turner, he's like, I want to get in the wrestling business. And then, long story, we've heard this all before, but Bischoff becomes president, and then they put together a plan. They put Monday Nitro on the air, and then Lex Luger, he defects basically showing up on the very first Monday Nitro just after SummerSlam. Okay. So he kind of did that thing where I was on one thing and now I'm on this thing. And, you know, he wanted to come back to WCW so much. I think he was making about $750,000 a year at WWE. I think that was his contract. And, you know, Luger's one of those first-time guys that really actually made his, you know, guaranteed contracts. Bischoff, knowing that Luger's kind of a pain in the butt, you know, he's a little bit of a pain in the butt. So, see, I'm saying good words because I know my little niece and nephew are listening.
I can fake it.
And they'll call you out on it.
They will definitely call you out on it. So never say anything about Elegante and a box. Sorry. Anyway. So he's kind of a pain in the butt. Basically, he comes back, $750,000 contract in WWF. He wants to leave so bad. He accepts $150,000 contract. And essentially, Bischoff has said that it was a conditional deal. I really didn't want Luger. Sting was saying good things. Hey, bring him back. So he takes a $150,000 deal. He shows that he's in a good mindset, and then he gets him back up to where he was with the WWF very soon, much after that. But it proved to Bischoff that Luger was in it to win it. Why I'm getting to this is basically Luger shows up on the very first Nitro. Everybody's thinking, oh, this dude, he's a longtime NWA guy, but at the same time, this dude's a WWF guy. So NWO appears very soon in 96, and it is thought to be WWF at that time. They're, you know, Scott Hall, they think he's Razor Ramon.
Hey, wait a minute. I can't believe what I'm seeing.
You people,
What's with him?
you know who I am. But you don't know why I'm here.
Are we going to get security here?
Where is Billionaire Ted? Where is the Nacho Man? That punk can't even get in the building. Me, I go wherever I want, whenever I want.
Listen, we need to get somebody to call.
And where, oh where, is Scheme Gene? 'Cause I got a scoop for you. When that Ken doll look-alike, when that weatherman wannabe comes out here later tonight, I got a challenge for him, for Billionaire Ted, for the Nacho Man, and for anybody else in WCW. Hey, you want to go to war? You want a war? You're going to get one.
Kevin Nash, they think he's Diesel. So they think that WWF was attacking. And honestly, that is the start of the Attitude Era. I know the WWF coined that term, but the NWO started the Attitude Era, in my opinion. NWO. So this is just kind of continuing their rivalry. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. But no, that's such a great, such a great point. And no matter what you want to say, the start of that first Nitro where Luger shows up at the end, that's kind of one of the first shots of the real war, I think, between the two companies. And then it just intensifies. And, WCW did something that probably many didn't think they could do for a long time. And it was just great to watch and a great time to be a wrestling fan.
Absolutely is. And so then WCW wins for 83 weeks in a row, really on the backs of NWO and Hogan's heel turn. And 83 weeks, they beat the NFL of wrestling. And, that's impressive. Now, of course, on the other channel, they're not going down lightly because roughly around this time, 97, 98, there starts the Stone Cold McMahon feud. I think you might hear a little bit about this later, but anyway, they're fighting back. They're not going to go down lightly. They've obviously got guys like Stone Cold, The Rock, Mankind, Undertaker, Heartbreak Kid, Triple H, DX, all these things. I don't care what you say, DX is a ripoff of the NWO. But anyway.
Doesn't mean we can't like it too, though.
Right. You can like it too. But then also WCW isn't just the NWO. They have great guys like Sting doing a crow gimmick. You've got DDP. You've got Macho Man. You've got all these great guys that are not, Scott Steiner. There's some big names. Booker T. You got some great names. So really, they're not going down lightly. Then, of course, you got, the Crow Sting working against the Hulk Hogan gimmick, which, the Sting NWO feud is kind of the top tier feud compared to the McMahon Austin feud, and then, you get into it and then DX invades WCW. You can't forget about that. Of course, then the 1997 Montreal Screwjob. And of course, that leads to Bret Hart coming to WCW. So that is kind of a shot that, I hate that he did that. Honestly, either I wish he would have been there earlier where he could have really got a lot out of his career. And then, of course, Goldberg, unfortunately, ends his career, sadly. I just feel like Bret Hart, McMahon told Bret they won't know what to do with you there. And that just shows how smart Vince is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and then, of course, the massive monster Goldberg shows up and he commits to his streak. And I'm just kind of going over these options of this war here between these two. WCW also has some great time with the Radicals. Of course, you had all these great cruiserweights like Benoit, Malenko, Jericho, Rey Mysterio, and then, of course, a lot of the Mexican guys. So, unfortunately, what ends up happening with WCW, one thing is they get a merger with AOL Time Warner. Time Warner AOL merger was not good for WCW because AOL took over and they didn't really care for pro wrestling. They thought it was too expensive. They could run another show. They could run episodes of Law and Order in its place. TNT's deal back in the day, we were like, TNT, we know drama. And it's like, okay, yeah, you've got great drama with WCW, but they're pushing it out thinking they can just run another syndicated show and not spend the money that they're spending on WCW. Of course, then they get freaked out, and so they bring in this guy that had been working very well in the Attitude Era under Vince McMahon in the booking committee with Vince McMahon. You had Vince Russo. So WCW thinks, well, let's bring the guy in that has he's the creative guy. So bring him in to WCW. And personally, all due respect, he basically kills WCW. He does not have Vince to rein him in. And to me, Russo kind of ended it. Of course, 2001, Vince wins and buys WCW.
Do you think that, I don't know, have you ever heard the thing that they think Vince basically let Russo go to them because he knew he would ruin it? I mean, or do you think he was some kind of plant? Or, I don't know.
It's a possibility, man. Who knows? You wouldn't.
We probably never know that answer, but
yeah. And then, of course, 2001, Vince McMahon buys the company, and he now is the owner of WCW for a paltry $2 million. And, part of the deal is Bischoff had a company that was going to buy it, but I think the deal was they were trying to stay on TNT. I don't think AOL really gave a crap about that. They would rather someone take it and leave rather than try to pay more and stay. So Vince takes WCW, turns it into a horrible storyline. I love the start of it. I love the idea of it. The invasion angle made total sense. I love the WrestleMania when you saw a lot of those power plant guys show up. And dude, it was great. It got me excited. You saw Booker T there, but all the major names that were still locked up in contracts got to sit at home and get paid because of the buyout and stuff. So Vince didn't bring in the real big names that you wanted to see. He got got them eventually, but at first it was, you know, the young guys, and unfortunately they just didn't have it. And that invasion angle, you add in ECW, and it just doesn't end up correctly. That gets all mixed up, and Jericho should have been here. I don't know if I believe Austin being in the WCW side.
That makes sense, yeah.
It doesn't. So anyway, that's basically the run of the WCW versus WWF feud. I think it was legendary in my wrestling fandom, but, you know, absolutely a great feud, and it has to be there on the list, in my opinion, of the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, like I said with the Piper and Hogan feud, it was missing this. What I'll say that the WCW feud was missing is that ending of a great like invasion angle. Like, you didn't have Sting, you didn't have the Outsiders, you didn't have Hogan, you didn't have Macho, you didn't have Luger, you didn't have Goldberg. I mean, like, so much you didn't have. They didn't have Flair at that time. Did they have Flair at that? No.
Flair came
all those guys were on guaranteed contracts that lasted. That was from that AOL Time Warner had to pay, and I think the other guys weren't.
Right.
They were just under WCW contracts.
Right.
So they were bought up, the contracts were, but the other ones were still getting paid to sit at home. Basically, Kevin Nash is like, why would I want to go on the road when I'm sit home and do nothing and make money? So,
I mean, he's well off, and he's not an idiot. He's a very intelligent man. All those guys, I think they had great potential to make it a great thing. I mean, can you imagine? And I think the idea for a what if on the invasion angle is something huge for us, because, you know, can you imagine a Goldberg-led invasion with, you know, you don't even have to have Hogan, Nash, and Hall. You can have DDP. You can have...
they didn't have DDP either, I don't think.
Yeah, you can have Goldberg, DDP, Sting. I mean, Scott Steiner, Rey Mysterio. You can have all these guys, bring them in, boom, 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 huge deal. That could have been massive. But instead, hey, you got the Mark Jindrak and Chuck Palumbo, and, you know, God love them.
My other problem, too, is Vince, with very few exceptions, always seemed to bury the WCW talent.
Totally. Very few exceptions.
Which is why Sting didn't want to come in.
Right. But I mean, you know, really, Rey Mysterio and Booker T, I mean, you know, that's kind of the two that...
And he gave that stalker angle with DDP, and that was a winner, too. I mean, like,
DDP should have came in and worked The Rock immediately for the People's Champion gimmick, you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But well. Yeah. Literally.
That's a what if for us.
Yeah, that is definitely a what if in the future. So, yeah, I think that's our first two. I think those were great. I definitely enjoyed that. We'll take a break, listen to a couple of our buddies' commercials, and we'll be right back after these messages with more of the Mount Rushmore of Pro Wrestling Feuds.
If you're a pro wrestling fan, there's something for everyone at the Cheap Heat TV Podcast Network. From the Pro Wrestling Discussion Show, Cheap Heat TV Live, to the interview show, the Jackson Interaction Podcast with the king of all wrestling media, Gene Jackson, to the silliness of the Whitey Jenkins Show, and the brand new Zip, Xander's Irresistible Podcast with Charles Anders. You can check them all out and much more over at cheapheattvlive.com.
Hey everyone, this is Shane from Insane Shane's World. I release wrestling figures of enhancement talent, mid-card wrestlers, and wrestlers that you never thought would have a figure available. So if you're interested in adding a really cool and rare figure to your collection, then don't hesitate to contact me at shamtheman73@gmail.com. That's SHAMtheman73@gmail.com. You can also join my Facebook group. Just search Insane Shane's World.
All right, we are back with the Mount Rushmore of Pro Wrestling Feuds. And Sheik, I just talked a whole bunch about WCW and WWF, but as our normal way to go, I'm going to go ahead and start this one off.
Let's go. I'm ready for it.
All right, sounds good. Got this going here. This one is tough. This one could have been the ultimate one for me because of the way that I think about these two. But when it comes down to it, you've got the Rock and Roll Express.
Well, stand up the king of rock and roll street. Got a rock and roll band, got that boogie woogie beat. At the boogie woogie dance hall. Yeah, let me tell y'all. I said the lights are flashing, checks are cashing at the boogie woogie dance hall. 1, 2, 3, y'all.
Versus the Midnight Express.
Dun, 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 dun.
That's easy. If you do the music, I don't have to play the music. If you do that, I don't think we'll get a copyright strike on YouTube. So just keep doing that. Anyway. Yeah, I love it. The best tag team feud of all time, right? Is there a better one?
There is not a better one. This is the one that I removed from my list because I knew you had it on there. And I was like, I get to talk about this, and I could have another one on my list. Basically, this made room for Gorilla and Bobby the Brain Heenan to be on the list. So
I love it. I love it.
We're gonna talk about this amazing feud that if it weren't for some of the people being out of the business or passed away, unfortunately, this could still be ongoing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So it started in the Mid-South. Of course, that's the Bill Watts territory, which was odd because Bill always loved the tough guys. You know what I mean? He wasn't necessarily a pretty boy guy. And these guys, even though they weren't pretty boys, the Midnight Express at the same time kind of portrayed that role. They were not like your tough heels. So with that being said, obviously they started in the Mid-South. The scaffold match they did long before the Skywalkers, actually. I know Memphis actually originated the scaffold match, but as a million other things, but they did a scaffold match long before the Skywalkers. And then, of course, they both come to JCP in 1985. And then this is really cool. And I think I never thought about this, but the Rock and Roll actually won the gold the very first night. Who'd they beat?
Was it the Russians?
Yes, my brother. Yes, very nice. Yadua.
Uncle Ivan. Uncle Ivan.
Uncle Ivan. I tell you, McIntyre. I always love it. McIntyre. I tell you. Well, he always talked like that. It's so funny. Got to meet him. Great guy. So Condrey left the Midnight. So this is, of course, the greatest villain tag team, in my opinion. They are just so good. Of course, you have to include Jim Cornette. Just has to be in that crew. But Loverboy Dennis Condrey left in 1987, and Stan Lane came in. And honestly, it was one of the smoothest transitions I think you could ever have for a tag team. Dennis Condrey is probably much more of the better worker in the ring, but Stan also had that element of kind of like, okay, no weird here. The dude's a good looking dude, so he's kind of elevates them in the looks department, but at the same time, he doesn't drop them down. I mean, had a legendary team in the Fabulous Ones with Steve Keirn. So it's not like Stan's a chump. I'm just saying Dennis Condrey is the worker of the bunch there, but you got Bobby, he takes care of that. So you can let Stan be the pretty boy of the team. So this feud with the Rock and Roll, that spanned actual 35 years, man. And, even up into the WWF where they brought in the Rock and Roll and this fake Midnight Express team with Bob Holly and Bart Good. Yeah, and it was horrible. Of course, the Rock and Roll are great, and they're doing their thing, and they've got the NWA tag team titles in this. But Midnight Express, man, I don't like that. It had nothing to do with the two guys of course, Bobby didn't have anything to do with the original of Norvell Austin, Randy Rose, and Dennis Condrey. But at the same time, when it turns into this, I just hated it. And so, Jim Cornette, honestly, though, was just as important to the Midnights as the two guys in the ring. Now, the Midnights actually ended. This was their official end on the main stage of WCW when Jim and Stan quit after losing a match at Halloween Havoc 1990 to Tommy Rich and who?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Ricky Morton. And so it's kind of funny that happened, right? Because Robert was out with leg, and then
hurt leg,
Yeah, Ricky was a heel at that time, and he was in the York Foundation. And so as they quit, Eaton actually got a singles push because of his loyalty to WCW, and Lane joined the Heavenly Bodies with Dr. Tom Pritchard, which in your own thinking there led to the Smoky Mountain, becoming a thing. And then that's when he was in the Heavenly Bodies. And honestly, they were a great tag team too. Very Midnight Express-ish, that kind of deal. Then of course Bobby passed in 2021, which officially ended the Rock and Roll Midnight feud. I don't think there'll ever be another tag team feud like it. I don't think there'll ever be a singles feud like it. Arguably, you could say that there has never been a feud like this one. The Midnights absolutely need to be in the Hall of Fame yesterday.
ASAP.
One thing that kind of reminded me of the Rock and Roll versus Midnight in a newer sense was the Hardy Boys versus Christian and Edge. That one always to me had a little bit of a Midnight Rock and Roll feel to it. But anyway, those are my notes on this feud. I think the Midnight and the Rock and Roll, heck man, I just don't know that you'll ever have another feud like it.
It's a top tag team feud, if not the top feud of all time in wrestling, in my opinion. It's, and the Heavenly Bodies might as well be called the Midnight Express as well.
Right.
Because they were, just the inclusion of, Stan was around, then Bobby was around, and they might as well be called the Midnight Express too. And it just furthers the feud when you think about it that way, that these two teams were always going back and forth, and they were the perfect heel. And you talked about Dennis Condrey leaving. Stan Lane, Bobby Eaton is my favorite version of the Midnights anyway.
Right.
No offense to Dennis Condrey.
No.
But Stan Lane, Stan Lane kind of had more of like an outward arrogance. You know what I'm saying? He had more of that outward arrogance that kind of fit even being a heel even more. Like Bobby was always quiet,
just quiet.
So he doesn't exude that heel mentality, but Stan and Dennis Condrey kind of evokes the kind of Arn Anderson type heel to me.
And you had Jim, so they never had to talk ever.
They didn't have to, right?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, and that Jim, when you have a manager with the quick, he's the Louisville lip. They don't mean that for nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why I say, I was on Twitter the other day, those very emotionally mature and extremely reasonable people over on Twitter.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The most understanding folks in the world. I was over there and I was saying,
right up there with the YouTube comment section, right?
Yeah, the YouTube comment section also rivals it in the most, reasonable and logical way. With that being said, though, I was typing, what they should do is they should put Dennis and Stan and have them accept it, obviously, including Bobby, and then have Jim there. So you would have Jim, Dennis, and Stan. And people just fell to pieces. They were like, they were never a tag team. And it's like, dude.
I know that.
Are you kidding me? I'm not pretending that they were. What I mean is obviously one of the greatest of all time cannot be there. Bobby passed. Why not have, it wouldn't be correct anyway if all three of them weren't going in. You know what I mean? And Absolutely. Then, of course, you have to have Jim Cornette. And Jim Ross has said that maybe that's what's holding everything up with them going in. But
I think so. I think so, too.
You got to have Jim Cornette, Dennis, and Stan. In lieu of Bobby not being there, Bobby would honestly be on the list. He would be in there, but of course he can't be there to be in there. So you then have Dennis, Stan, and Jim all on the stage together, and That's it. All three of them go in. They can be called the Midnight Express. The Midnight Express started as a 3-man unit anyway, with Norville, Austin, Randy Rose, and Dennis Condrey. So there's nothing. I mean, the Freebirds went in, and they've had, several hundred members. No, I'm just kidding, but still. Anyway, the point being, and Twitter just fell to pieces. No, you can't put in Stan. You got to put in Dennis and Bobby. Oh, or somebody said, oh, well, you're not going to want to include Bobby? And I'm like, you moron. You're not. Anyway, so that's my conversation with the Rock and Roll versus Midnight Express feud. And I just love it. And honestly, it's probably my favorite, in my heart, my favorite feud of all time. So,
yeah, it's great. It's great. That's all you can say.
Well, what is your next one, my brother?
My next one is maybe for fans, maybe one of the most personal feuds of all time. And that is Bret the Hitman Hart versus the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels.
Oh, man. Yeah. This might be the most feud of a feuds. This is the most feud. Yeah.
Yeah. This feud has kind of got, you look at it at times, and I know we've talked about it. We talked about it with Gene there a little bit. I've kind of always leaned more Bret. And nothing against Shawn Michaels, but I think just everything I've learned about Shawn Michaels during that time,
okay,
is that he was just a big jerk and hard to work with.
Yeah,
and so that kind of makes you lean more towards, well, hey, I like Bret better than if he was always going to be But there's no doubt that Shawn Michaels is one of the greatest to ever lace them up, along with Bret Hart. So you put the two together, and you put some personal feelings in there, and it gets real.
Absolutely gets real, and that's what I meant by that. It's the most feud of the feuds, because it's, dude, I mean, they hated each other, and there was nothing about it that didn't show you that they hated each other. They really hated each other, and, I know they made up, and I feel like, but you know how Bret is in them grudges, man.
Bret does turn me off a little bit with his, like, where I guess the point that he can't just in some ways forgive, but, and I know it might be hard. I know, like, he holds a big grudge currently against Goldberg, and I understand that. Goldberg probably wasn't the safest worker in the world at his point, but he was kind of created to be a monster. And sometimes I think you lose the safety sometimes of being a monster. We're just trying to do new things. And that kick kind of thing he was doing was kind of a newer thing. Goldberg when I've heard Goldberg talk about it, and I'm not a big Goldberg mark, and I'm not, I don't hate him. I don't love his work, but he meant a lot to wrestling. Goldberg seems remorseful for what happened. I think if he could change it, he would, but obviously he can't.
And obviously Goldberg's probably not the guy to keep bringing it up either. He's probably like, okay, dude, I get it. I'm so sorry. Let it go.
Yeah. I think the last time I heard him say, he was like, dude, I'm sorry. I can't say I'm sorry enough, apparently. So, I mean,
yeah, it is a shame, but at the same time, I mean, I would be pissed too, because it did cut his career short and cost him millions of dollars. And what was Bret best at? Wrestling, and he could no longer wrestle, and that's sad,
But back to Shawn and Bret. Sorry, we got off on a little side road there, but they were friends before everything. And I think if you look at what probably started to drive some of a wedge between them is when they started to vie for the top title to get against each other. So I think some jealousy crept in there, and they obviously wanted to be the top guy and say, hey, well, I can do this better than you, and everything like that. So
yeah, and I almost think Vince got off on putting them together, pitting them against one another, because, he knew that he could create reality. You almost have to throw Vince in that feud, because Vince, I feel like I've heard this said that Vince actually stoked the flames of that feud, and that Bret felt like he catered to Shawn. Shawn felt like he was catering to Bret. I feel like Bret had a little more authority on what he was getting, but I also feel like Shawn was that undeniable talent that was just, hey, Bret, it's unfortunate, bro, but you're here with me right now. It's like, how would you, if you were, man, I'm trying to think of somebody. It's probably like Dusty and Rick, like at the same time, they liked each other, but at the same time, they were wanting the top spot. And, I almost feel like that's part of what made their feud so great. So
yeah, and you got the, Bret didn't like it when Shawn posed and play girl or whatever with the belt, and he thought that was like sacrilege almost. And have you seen that Bret Hart movie, The Wrestling with Shadows? Is that I don't think
it's a documentary? So. Man, you got to watch that. I'm surprised you haven't seen that. But anyway, I've watched it so many times I can almost quote it. But there's a scene where Bret's at home and his son has on all this HBK gear. And I feel like that's part of what ticked him off the both. Is his son. Yeah, because his son is like idolizing this guy who's being in Playboy. I almost feel like
I thought you were going to ask me if I'd seen the Playgirl pictures.
No. What I mean is the deal that if you have your son and that's your closest child at home, and you just think that that's what all kids are now doing, is basically they're idolizing this. So if his son hadn't have been a fan of HBK, he may not have been as hateful on him morally as he was. But who knows? That it's an interesting thought there.
And then like when DX formed, that kind of even more created the divide with DX versus the Hart Foundation. And you get the Sunny Days comment, which was to imply that Bret had a affair with Sunny when, from all accounts, he didn't. They might have been friendly to each other, but he didn't. And it was actually Shawn and Sunny that had a thing. So
100% did.
They 100% did have a thing. So it does make it awkward. I don't know. If he was just trying to, but Bret took that really personally when Bret's like the guy that's like, it's still real to me, damn.
Hey there, it's Internet's crying wrestling fan, Dave Wills, and you're listening to the Gimme Back My Pro Wrestling podcast. These guys keep wrestling still real to me, damn it.
Yeah, he is that guy. And he expects it to be treated that way by everyone. And, some guys just don't do that. Some guys don't play that same deal that Bret does. And, Bret came from a reality place. If you imagine having your father as one of the greatest shooters of all time. And for those that don't know, shoot means real. If you're a shooter, that means you can get it done on the legit side. So, his dad's a shooter, and he obviously expects himself to push a little more reality in his deal. And, Shawn is kind of the opposite of that, but also Shawn is so spectacular to watch. They're like a yin and yang, and that's kind of what made their feud so awesome and their matches so great. But also the out of the ring too.
Yeah, and their Iron Man match is just one of the best ever.
Yeah,
you didn't think much. I mean, you hear a lot about Flair talking about going hour Broadways and all this, but at that point, you didn't really see that a lot on TV or pay-per-view. That was more like house show stuff. And to see that hour time limit, well, with all the different pins and how whatever I can't even remember what the count was as far as tap outs and pins and all that stuff.
Which I always, it's funny. An Iron Man match always kind of bugs me. And I kind of like it when they go almost the distance without any taps, because to me, it's like, okay, he got you in a finisher and it's like 3 minutes in and you tap. You would not normally do that in a normal match. Are you only, is the psychology there that you would only do it because it won't end the match and you're trying to get out of that hold? Or Do you know what I'm saying? So like 3 minutes in, somebody taps, and it's like, dude, you wouldn't do that in a normal match. If this were like a 30-minute match, you wouldn't automatically tap in 3 minutes. I know that wouldn't happen. So are you doing it from the perspective
to save the punishment?
To save the punishment, or is it like you're tapping, or are you just tapping because you know it's not going to cost you the match and you can hopefully get a win back or whatever? Anyway, that's always been my gripe about Iron Man matches, and maybe you guys can explain them to me better in the notes or whatever. But that's my thoughts.
Yeah, and you know, to kind of wrap up talking about the feud, the Montreal screw job is one of the most talked about moments in the history of wrestling. Is, you know, Bret was leaving for WCW, get that guaranteed money. He didn't want to drop.
Stay there. He was going to stay there, and he signed to a 20-year deal or some 10-year, 20-year deal. And Vince was like, "I can't afford that. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to break the contract. I can't afford to pay you this. I'd rather just give you a buyout." And he said, "See what they can do for you at WCW."
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, and he was going to stay. He wanted to stay,
right?
And then Vince, you know, kind of said, "No, I can't do that." And so then you got Bret didn't want to drop the title in Canada, supposedly.
Yeah.
And he was going to maybe just turn it over at Raw, kind of. I know that the Undertaker had said, "Hey, let me beat him. He'll lose to me." And you know, that never worked out. And then so the only way they could come up with a thing was, I think, did Hunter have something to do, like saying, "Hey, you're just gonna have to take it off of him, like you're gonna have to cheat him out of it." I think Hunter may have gave some input there, and the way they came up with it, they got Earl Hebner to ring the bell when Shawn put the sharpshooter on Bret, and then you get a big loogie in the face for Mr. McMahon for it. So, and
really set up with the, you know, with making McMahon a heel. It took him from this announcer-based character to a very real boss type, which then ultimately leads to him being a heel and very hated. And, you know, that it's a great segue actually for what we're talking here. But, you know, it really it was, like I said, it was a three-way feud in the long run. Like you have to have, you know, Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express. This one you had to have Vince McMahon involved to do that. And then I think, you know, I think Triple H was out there as somewhat of a protector kind of thing, to where it's like if it went south, he was at least there to do something to help. But Moolah did it to Wendy Richter when they were getting rid of Wendy Richter, and Moolah did a quick pin, and Wendy jumps up. It's like, what the heck, you know? And yeah, but that was kind of one of the first screw jobs. Obviously, there's probably been many, but long story short, this one was definitely the largest. And also, a lot of guys think it was a work, you know, but
I mean, there's still people who think it was a total work and that everybody knew about it and they were trying to do this. I mean, I think Scott Hall
which is tight with Shawn, which almost makes me question everything, you know, but
yeah, I mean, like I don't know, but the creation of the Mr. McMahon character ultimately, after the screw job, when he did that interview and he said Bret screwed Bret.
Yeah.
Let's cut right to the chase. 7 days ago at the Survivor Series, did you or did you not screw Bret Hart?
Some would say I screwed Bret Hart. Bret Hart would definitely tell you I screwed him. I look at it from a different standpoint. I look at it from the standpoint of the referee did not screw Bret Hart. Shawn Michaels certainly did not screw Bret Hart. Nor did Vince McMahon screw Bret Hart. I truly believe that Bret Hart screwed Bret Hart. And he can look in the mirror and know that.
That kind of right there is like the cocoon opening on Mr. McMahon to show the villain, Mr. McMahon.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. And honestly, you know, if you're okay, I'm going to segue that right into what I'm about to talk about, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely.
It is a no-brainer what I'm about to talk about. In my opinion, this is probably the greatest feud of all time because of probably the legend of it, the story it told, the money it made, the business it saved, the channel it changed. You know, so Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon. To me, this one is so hard to beat. And I have personal favorites that I love that did not make it on this list, but I could not. If I took all of these off, I would still have to leave this one on here. So Sting and the NWO is really the only feud that came close to this in the WCW, in my opinion. This might be, like I said earlier, this may be the GOAT of feuds. You know, this was your classic hate your boss story. Everybody's had a boss. Everybody's hated one of them. I've had bosses I've loved, thought they were great. I've had bosses that I'd rather never see again. And I'll leave it at that. You know, Vince had turned semi-heel following the Bret screwjob that we just talked about. Austin was the perfect no-nonsense working man opponent. He was awesome. He didn't take no crap from anybody. He was just going to do it like he needed to do it. In 1998, WWE was losing to WCW, and they had been doing this for 83 weeks or so. And honestly, this one kept them above water, and this one kept them alive. You know, at Mania 14, Vince said he didn't want Austin as champion. So what he did is he hires Mike Tyson to ensure that that doesn't happen. Well, we all know how that one went. Tyson does a little screw job, you know, and ends up knocking out Shawn, and Austin wins the title, and it worked out perfectly. But man, that lead up to that, Austin up in, you know, Tyson's face, it's so legendary. After that match, Vince becomes obsessed with getting the belt off of Austin. And so what happens is Kane ends up coming in. He wins the belt for one night at King of the Ring 98 and actually loses it the very next night on Raw back to Austin. Vince actually vacates the title after a failed triple threat with Kane and Taker, where they basically both want the belt, so they both pin him, and then that can't happen because that's not a good finish, so they vacate the title. So Austin is on the chase again. So he jumps in the 99 Rumble, and he actually ends up losing it to McMahon. He wins the title back at the St. Valentine's Massacre after he beat the
action figure
out of Vince McMahon. You know,
wore him out.
Yeah, and then that leads into the corporate ministry saga, which is some great stuff, you know, some crazy stuff where Vince's family becomes involved and Undertaker's, you know, in the feud. And, you know, obviously Shawn had gone out after the Mania 14 to get back surgery. He was not doing well, take some time off. So then becomes the Undertaker as his main feud. And of course, the corporate ministry, that was some cool stuff, you know, that fed us the greatest tag team of all time. Who's that, Jared?
The APA.
And damn. Anyway, you know, Austin actually gets hit with a car, and they don't know who it is, so he puts him out for 9 months. Well, when he comes back, he's on the hunt after the 9 months off. I don't remember if he was just taking time off to get some things taken care of. I can't remember what it was, but he took off 9 months. He comes back, and Rikishi actually ends up admitting that he hit him with the car. And so Austin is on the chase again for the belt. He wins the 2000 Royal Rumble and became a heel. So he wins the title at the 2000 Rumble, and McMahon walks out and he shakes his hand. Austin has said that he wishes instead that he would have changed the story, kicked him in the gut, stunned him, and kept it going. But unfortunately, you know, honestly, this is kind of it's kind of the semi-end of their great feud. And then the invasion angle, and it kind of led Austin to becoming like a softer, funnier character. He's not really, yeah, what? Anyway, exactly. And so McMahon gets mad at him, and he's like, dude, you know, I want your old self back. Get evil. And then what ends up happening is that ends up biting Vince in the butt, because then he turns on Vince and defects to the Alliance and becomes the leader of the WCW crew. And so after the invasion, Austin no-shows and Vince fires him legitimately. So Austin he says, I took my ball and went home. And that's just, he's done that twice, I think. And Vince actually legit fires him. And so Austin comes back as a GM because his neck issues were causing him to basically want to retire. He does some great matches with The Rock at Mania, ends up retiring, and the feud ends, or did it? Because every time Vince and Stone Cold are on the same screen, there's always that level of like, is it gonna happen?
How many members of the McMahon clan have taken a stunner?
Oh, I mean, I'll say many, but none worse than McMahon himself.
Linda McMahon's is the worst.
Yeah, you're right. That is horrible.
I mean, it's just a complete miss.
Yeah.
But there's got to be one of the kids of Shane's or Hunter and Stephanie that has got to take a stunner one of these days.
Totally. Absolutely.
To make it a 3-generation stunner.
Oh, yeah, completely. And Vince, I think, probably not going to wrestle ever again, I would hope. But also, Stone Cold, he looks like he could always go at it, But anyway, that's me talking about the Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon feud. And honestly, truthfully, that was this was the feud that made me change the channel from WCW usually,
It won the war, too.
It did. It absolutely did.
Whether WCW was on the decline anyway, it won the war. Getting to see Stone Cold just torment Vince McMahon made people change the channel, and it won the war.
Absolutely. All right, Jeff, what's your next one?
Well, so I originally wanted to just say it as like a 1v1 thing, but what I came down to in the end when I was making my list is it always seemed like it was this one versus this group. And I'm talking about the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes versus the Four Horsemen.
Oh, yeah, Daddy.
So, the Four Horsemen were formed in 1985, thanks to Arn Anderson's quick phrasing. And it always seemed like after then, from 85 to 87, really, that anytime it was Flair and Dusty, the Horsemen were somewhere around the corner. And then you could get Magnum helping Dusty, Barry Windham, the Rock and Roll Express, Nikita, the Road Warriors, Ronnie Garvin, any of those helping out Dusty. But what always remained the same is that, I feel like Dusty had feuds with Flair, with Arn, with Tully, Arn and Tully, Arn and Ole. It was just a great feud, and it felt real. I've heard the stories of them buying fur coats that, maybe Dusty went and got one, and then Flair got a bigger one. Then Dusty went back and got a bigger one. Then Flair come back and got a bigger one. So in some ways, it feels like it should be Dusty and Flair in the feud, but I just couldn't count out the Horsemen and what they meant to coming in and what they break Dusty's ankle. And
all
that stuff. It just... And there's stories of, is it Philadelphia or something like that, where they were in a cage or something like that, and they went in, and then the fans got so close, they didn't know if they were going to be able to make it back out of the ring.
Yeah.
It was so and I can't remember how it all ended, but they basically, I think some had to come out and help them kind of clear the way for them to get out, because it was just like they were the fans were pressed up against the cage basically. So, and
I love that feud that he had with Tully. I think that's one of the best too, when he was working Tully, and especially at that Starrcade, the Night of the Skywalkers. I love that one.
Yeah, it's so great, and I feel like that just the back and forth that they could have in the promo. Hard times, Daddy. You don't know about hard times.
Yeah,
hard times working 30 years. Doing a very poor Dusty Rhodes, guys. I'm sorry, but just the everyman promos from Dusty and the arrogant top 1% from Ric Flair and the rest of the Horsemen just fit so nicely into what Jim Crockett Promotions was trying to do at the time. And, you know, that's why it felt real. I mean, it did.
Yeah.
But they had, you know, ultimate respect for each other. They always had great chemistry in the ring too. You know, all those guys could work. So it didn't take much to make it great. What's your, like, when you think of Dusty versus the Four Horsemen, you got like a specific thing you could think of that was like, man, that's like.
Well, you know, one of the things that always stuck out to me is I've heard Flair talk about this, that Dusty was a Celtics fan and Flair was a Lakers fan. And that makes so much sense, down to the fact that, you know, you look at Dusty, who's like the working man, every man, and that's kind of like Larry Bird and the Celtics were, from a working man city, working man from Indiana, you know, rural town in Indiana. Then you've got Magic and Showtime and Kareem and the greatest, you know, some of the greatest players of all time on a team in LA, the glitz, the glamour. You know, knowing that they liked those teams, it would only make sense. It would never make sense that Flair would be a Celtics fan or Dusty would be a Lakers fan. It just wouldn't make sense. So that one, it always stuck out to me as something that stuck out. But, you know, again, Arn's promos during that time, Dusty, you know, I love when they break his arm and they follow him to like the studios or something. And it's always questionable because at that time, you know, Dusty's like, make it good or break it good or whatever.
Yeah. Make it good! Ah!
And it's like, does he mean like make it good? Like you better do it.
You better.
If you don't, you know.
Yeah.
But it also kind of seemed like he's telling him make it look good, and he didn't know he was going to catch it on camera or something. But I don't know. I always took it as the other. It's like, you better do it right, because if you don't, I'm coming to kill you. You know. So
yeah. How unfortunate is it that we never could get Cody Rhodes versus Reed Flair?
Oh, I know. I mean, it's unfortunate for many reasons, but
many reasons, yeah.
But for sure, you know, it's just, that's unfortunate because you know, Cody came out, when Cody first came out, you know, people say, okay, Dusty's son, but he was a Ric Flair. I mean, he down to the boots, he wore the knee pads like him. He you know, the semi-matching boots and trunks. I mean, he had the CR on his trunks. He was almost a Ric Flair gimmick at first, but you know. Yeah,
it's just a great feud, and it's probably one of the most memorable from my childhood because we were big Crockett fans. So we saw a lot of Crockett wrestling back then. So
oh yeah, that was the stuff to us. And to know, you know, the Dusty Horseman feud. We actually had a listener, Stephen Brandt, on Twitter when I posted the first coming soon of this show that we're about to drop here. You know, he posted Dusty and the Horseman, and I said, well, I think you're going to be happy.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's just it's timeless.
Absolutely timeless. And there's nothing better than the War Games, you know, when he would enlist the Road Warriors there and he would have somebody else there, and they would end up, it would either, you know, Nikita and the Road Warriors and Dusty and the War Games versus the Horsemen. That's some of my favorite stuff. That if you were to say Jared, Jimmy, if you were to say Jared, I'd be like, well, are you talking to yourself? But if you were to say Jimmy, what's your favorite match? I think definitely the War Games matches are high up there. You know, the Tully Dusty at the Skywalkers match is great. And of course, any Dusty and Rick at any Starrcade you ever have, those are awesome. But I love those War Games, man. Those War Games are like the Royal Rumble to me. You know what I mean? So
yeah, what do you think Road Warrior Hawk's blood pressure or pulse rate was on the outside prowling when he was waiting to get in?
I mean, it was off the charts. I guarantee it. He was like that. He was like a cat. You know what I mean? He was like a leopard or like a lion out there, just stalking.
He was like a dad waiting for his kid to be born in the waiting room. Like,
that's great. I've never heard
pacing
that.
back and forth. Just pacing back and forth. I mean, like, I don't know.
Do nothing. You have nothing to do, you know. So
I'd probably been like, dude, calm down. Like,
yeah, but it built the anticipation.
Oh, it did. It was great.
You know?
It was great. Yeah.
And did the good guys ever win the coin toss?
No, never. It was always the bad guys. Always got the 2
had the advantage. Yeah, always had the advantage. But that's how it goes. But unfortunately, there's never going to be another one like this one for sure. So
no.
Yeah. Well,
we could talk about them all day, and there's several we left out, and we apologize for that, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of named off the list earlier, and
you did a great job with that.
Yeah, but it was just to kind of represent that we know the feud's there, we know that they exist, and we know that there's a million more. I mean, you could talk Lawler, Dundee, you could talk a million more, but when it came down to it, these were the Mount Rushmore of our great. These are the Mount Rushmore of the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling Feuds. So I think that's it for this topic. I think next Mount Rushmore is I want to do the Mount Rushmore of big men, of the big guys.
Oh.
Yeah, I've kind of fallen down a big John Studd rabbit hole lately, and so I don't know. Maybe that reminds me of something. I think what is it? Sheik. You
fell down a rabbit hole. I might have fell down a rabbit hole or two on YouTube.
Well, maybe we'll let's talk more about that after these messages. We'll be right back.
This is The Big Picture, Michael Jablonski. Don't forget to tune in every week to Jablonski's Pissed Off on the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling YouTube channel.
The Hotspot in the sport, he's gonna tell you all about it. He doesn't care what you think, you're gonna hear all about it. Mike Jablonski, he's so pissed off. Mike Jablonski, he's so pissed off. Mike Jablonski, he's so pissed off. He's pissed off.
Welcome to the Monster Movie Stomp Down with me, Stompy, and my little brother Frank.
Hi, I'm Frank.
Yes, you are. So join us, Sludge, Mark, and Ruben as we review monster movies from all around the world.
And don't forget about the monthly contest and trivia.
That's right, peasants. You'll find extra content like the Underdogs, Monster Mash Wednesdays, Friday Night Fights, each week exclusively on our Facebook and Instagram.
So please join us at the Monster Movie Stomp Down.
Your one-stop shop for monster movie reviews, interviews, news, contests, and of course, me, Stumpy.
And Frank.
All right, we are back, and I think we alluded to something just before the break here, but recently, Sheik, you did something that you'd like to do a lot.
Man, I just get to surfing YouTube, and I'll be watching a video on this, watch some YouTube shorts. Might catch a Sheik short in there somewhere.
Oh,
might catch a Wolfie D video in there talking about Randy Savage or something like that. You got to check that out.
Definitely check that out.
Or might catch a Jamie Dundee clip when he was on the U-shoot stuff. That's entertaining.
Still getting heat for that too.
But then I found something that I'd never seen before, and it was the AWA's Wrestle Rock Rumble, and it's complete with a music video featuring all your favorite AWA stars of 1986.
Well, we'll be right back with The Sheik Fell Down a Rabbit Hole. DJ, hit that entrance music.
Wrestling videos sent you down a rabbit hole. Wrestling videos sent you down a rabbit hole. Wrestling videos sent you down a rabbit hole. Wrestling videos sent you down a rabbit hole.
All right, we are back with The Sheik Fell Down a Rabbit Hole, and you were saying it, and I think we got to play it. So right now, let's play the Wrestle Rock Rumble.
This is Ken Resnick, and I'm here to say we've got the greatest wrestlers in the AWA. But you're not here to listen to me mumble. Let's fill you in on the Wrestle Rock Rumble. Get on!
Wrestle Rock, be there.
We're the Midnight Rockers, Shawn and Marty. We love to wrestle, and we love to party. You don't have to worry, we're not gonna fumble, because we'll be shaking doing the Wrestle Rock Rumble. Out! Wrestle Rock, I'm the Sheik, and that's not funny. I got my army a lots of money. If Ganyan my way, I'll make him crumble. He be sorry, I did the Wrestle Rock Rumble.
Wrestle Rock, be there.
I'm Jerry Blackwell, and I want the Sheik. I want to get my hands on that pencil neck geek as I watch the EDF fumble. I'm going to make my splash in the Wrestle Rock Rumble.
The AWA, you, me, and Wrestle Rock.
I'm Greg Ganyan, I'm in a rage. I want Brody, and I want him in a cage. A high-flying drop kick will make him see double. I grind him up at the Wrestle Rock Rumble. Woo!
Wrestle Rock.
I'm Kurt Hennig and Big Scott Hall. And tag team champs will take on them all. So bring on the long riders, those dirt ball dumbos. We'll smear those bushes, do the Wrestle Rock Rumble.
This is Nick Bockwinkel, and I've got a passion. I'll get the title back from the humanoid Hanson. I've got the brains, and I'm not humble. I'll take the belt back and do the Wrestle Rock Rumble.
Wrestle Rock, April 20th, at the Dome.
Wrestle Rock, 86. Be there.
I'm Larry Zabisco. I won't be through till I get done slapping around Scott LeDoux. Gonna beat the ugly bartender into a bundle and laugh all the way doing Wrestle Rock Rumble. Ow! This skin talk got a mouth that won't quit, but I'm Scott LeDoux and wanna smack a little shit. And when I'm through, you won't be able to mumble. I'll be left alone doing the Wrestle Rock Rumble. Yeah!
Just one last word from the former champ Vern, but give it a lot of thought to one more turn. There's some old scores that still give me trouble, and I'm starting to get the urge to do the Wrestle Rock Rumble.
So there you have it, and now you know him. And on April 20th, it's at the Dome. So get your tickets to be under the bubble, because you two can be doing the Wrestle Rock Rumble. Do it! Wrestle Rock Rumble. Wrestle Rock Rumble.
The Wrestle Rock Rumble.
Wrestle Rock Rumble.
All right, guys, that's the Wrestle Rock Rumble. And first thing I want to say about that is Larry Zbyszko was killing it.
Yeah.
I mean, he could actually go in the singing.
Yes, yes.
And also honorable mention for doing great, Nick Bockwinkel. I mean, who would have thought Nick Bockwinkel would have even wanted to do this, let alone done great at it? And it's probably, I read a comment on the video I watched on YouTube. They're like, yeah, Nick Bockwinkel probably just showed up, did one take, and left, and like, yeah, that's good.
I got that one. Knocked it out, right? And Shawn and Marty did good. They made, they had to, I think, right?
Yeah. Vern, love Vern, but he just didn't fit with that spot.
Greg, love you, Greg, but wow.
Yeah.
And poor, these guys are not musicians, so their idea of timing for a song is not always the perfect. But I would say that Greg might have been the worst. Ken
Resnick probably sets back rhythm for people like about 90 years. So
yeah,
if you have to watch the video on YouTube to see his rhythm, it's off. But that's it. I saw something that talked about Crusher Blackwell. In his lines, he couldn't read. So
oh wow!
So they just kind of just had to let him go with it. And he didn't do bad, but it was just like it was. He didn't kind of get the best, but he couldn't read. Supposedly, is what I heard. I think from Scott Hall or something like that. And Scott Hall dated one of the models that showed on there. He said for a while.
Yeah,
Him and Kurt Hennig getting pushed into the pool by the models is pretty good. And see, some of that stuff was done at like Vegas, but the event was at the Metrodome in Minnesota. So it kind of get thrown off by thinking, is it in Vegas or what? But it's in Minnesota with the Metrodome. It's the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome. So, but
they do throw in those Vegas type mid things through the song, and
like there's like Playboy models of some kind of Vegas
fake
thing.
Maryland, fake Elvis impersonators. But I do agree. I think Zbyszko was the best out of the bunch.
It was Zbyszko, then Bockwinkel, and then the rest really fall off, honestly.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, there is a mid tier, but we're just going for A tier there. But it's worth a watch, guys. It's very 80s. If you're a kid of the 80s like we are, it's very 80s. It's it's just something I'd never seen, and it was very interesting.
I love when you fall down a good rabbit hole, you know?
Yeah, I fell down some bad ones before.
We all have, man. And I think that's where the term comes from. But at the same time, hey, I'm glad you're falling down some good rabbit holes here.
You really got to check it out for yourself, guys. But it's you get to see Bruiser Brody in it. It's pretty. He doesn't actually do anything the Sheik does for him, but it's
Sheik Adnan, and he doesn't do horrible. I mean, he keeps the voice, you know. Of course, it's a legit accent, you know.
Legit accent.
Omar Al-Kazan here. We're actually a real, Iraqi. So anyway, well, that was a great Sheik. Fell down a rabbit hole. All right, Sheik. Well, that was awesome, man. I really enjoyed the Sheik Fell Down a Rabbit Hole today, the Wrestle Rock Rumble. So, I just want to thank you all. Y'all listeners are the best. Y'all, we've been in the top 200. With the Dave Milliken episode, we've honestly been in the top 200 for weeks now. And when we get in the top 100, I'm stoked about that. But when we're in the top 200, man, that just means so much to us because there are literally probably thousands of wrestling podcasts, whether you include the YouTube, whether it's solely YouTube guys or they're just a kid who started one and never did anything with it. To me, it means so much to me that you all listen to us enough that actually keeps us in that top 200. I was blown away. We were in it for, longer than we've been in a while. And I'm just, honestly, it just means so much because the Wolfie D show, it doesn't surprise me that that's in the top 200. But when it comes to our show, it's just us. We're just, like I said, we're just two kids, Southwest Virginia, the southwestern part of Virginia.
There you go.
And I mean, we just do we're just having a fun time with it. So we thank you all so much. Of course, at GMBMPW on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Really means a lot if you follow us on those pages. We got a Facebook group, we got a Twitter, we got Instagram, we got YouTube, we got all that. And, just follow us on there. Another thing, again, I hate to say it a million times, but rating and reviewing, guys, means so much to us. It just to see the notes that you all put in there, it's just really appreciated. But at the same time, if you just put in a star rating, I'm okay with that. Anything like that helps because what it does is it helps with everything in the support of that. It's free too to just click the 5 stars. It's free. That's all you have to do.
We'll take the standard Meltzer 5-star rating.
Yeah, the standard Meltzer 5. I love it. And then also on our YouTube page, y'all, I'm doing my very best to try to put out some incredible stuff on YouTube that may not always be the normal type stuff. We've always got our Sheik shorts. Of course, we've got the past episodes of Jablonski's Pissed Off. If you want to enjoy those are always a good time to watch. And subscribe. And another thing is share it. Y'all that share, I mean, guys, it means so much. Wayne G, Macaronin, all you guys on the Twitter pages that share our stuff. Eddie Austin, y'all are the best. Y'all really mean a lot. Not only to the Wolfie D show, you always share that, but you actually share the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling stuff. And guys, I can't tell you how much that means to me that y'all do that for us because, we need that. It's the word of mouth that is helping us get our show out there to people. And we're on a zero budget. We're balling on a budget. We're not paying our guests. We're not doing all these crazy things. All we're doing is simply just trying to have fun and talk about pro wrestling. So once again, just thank you all so much for listening. Come back next time. I think we're going to have a cool episode. Not sure what it is yet, but you'll see the promotion for it soon. And again, we thank y'all so much.
I can't say enough. We just appreciate the listeners that they actually tune in to hear us talk about this stuff and are interested to hear us talk about these things. And
yeah,
we hope we're doing a good job. We think we've done pretty solid by you guys. So we'll keep it coming.
We'll keep it coming. And, with that being said, I think we're going to wrap today's show up again. It was the Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling feuds. And we hope you enjoyed it. One of the other things I want to say real quick is whenever I hear that somebody's wanting to be on the show as they listen, so many guys are saying, like Gene one time said, hey, I wanted to just chime in on something y'all said. And that means, that's amazing because that's the kind of the idea of this too, is, that you feel what we're saying. So again, like Sheik said, we thank y'all so much. It's humbling that you all listen to us, and we'll see you next time with more from Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling. Thanks again.
Don't forget,
fight a feud.
And we're ready for the feud.
With a tear in my eye. This is the greatest moment in my life.
We'll see you later.
This has been a James Rock Street production.